What's up, you guys? Rex here. In today's video, I'll be going over my 10 commandments that will hopefully help you decide where you should be applying to medical school. So first off, coming up with your school list is the most important part of your application that you have full control over. You have a lot of control over doing activities and volunteering, and you have some more control also over your GPA and MCAT, but you don't have total control over that. And you don't have total control of what your letters of recommendation are going to be like, but you do have control over what schools you apply to, and that is absolutely something that can be the difference between getting accepted anywhere or not getting accepted anywhere. I was very fortunate to have a lot of success in my own application cycle, more than I ever dreamed of, but I definitely could go back in time and apply to the wrong 30 schools, the wrong 40 schools maybe even, and gotten 0 acceptances and 0 interview invites. So the goal of this video is to not let that be you and allow you to position yourself in the best way possible to get the most acceptances that you deserve. And the overall goal of really coming up with the school list is finding the best fit. And you'll hear me use that word a lot. You'll hear medical schools use that word a lot, that we're looking for the right fit, the right student, the right fit. And so that really means having a school that has goals that align with your goals, and it's somewhere that is going to allow you to thrive and succeed. And finding a place that allows you to thrive and succeed is also going to be the kind of school that's most likely to accept you. You'll hear me mention that again and again. But without further ado, commandment number 1 is know thyself. And so the most important thing is to know what you want and know what kind of applicant you are. And so this means both like qualitatively of, are you an applicant that is very research focused? Are you very clinical experience focused? Are you a non-traditional applicant? Are you an applicant that has a ton of service and volunteering hours? And so sort of qualitatively know what type of applicant you are. Additionally, you want to have some sort of quantitative metric. And so this can just be your stats, MCAT, and GPA, or I went over in last week's video, the WedgeDawg Applicant Rating System. That's a starting point. But my biggest recommendation is to find someone that you really trust and who knows what they're talking about, who can go over your entire application, your personal statement, all of the activities. You can talk through those and can take into account your GPA and MCAT score and tell you straight up of like, all right, are you a really high tier applicant? Are you a mid-tier applicant? Are you gonna have to apply to more lower tier schools? Are you an applicant that should be focusing on research institutions? Should you be focusing on service institutions? You want someone who can tell you honestly, and you want to know yourself as well as possible so that you can actually find what the best fit is because you know what that fit is. Commandment number 2 is to understand the different tiers of schools so that you know what is like a really hard to get into school, what is a medium to get into school, and what are the as easy as there are. There's no school that's easy to get into for medical school by any means, but some are harder than others. And with that, understand that schools that have a super high average MCAT don't necessarily correlate to having a super low acceptance rate and vice versa. Good example is Florida State has like the lowest acceptance rate at 2.2%. However, their MCAT score of 507 is sort of below average for the average student that is accepted to a medical school. Meanwhile, you have a school like Washington University in St. Louis, which has an average MCAT score of 522, but they have an acceptance rate over 3 times what Florida State's is at 8.2%. That doesn't mean Wash U is an easier school to get into by any means. In fact, I would say broadly speaking, it's a much harder school to get into. But someone that's getting in to Washington University in St. Louis is not someone that's getting in to Florida State, and someone that's getting into Florida State is probably not someone that's getting into Wash U. That there are different tiers, and it's more about finding that fit of tier school, not necessarily just making sure you only apply to schools that are below your tier. You want to find fit more than, all right, am I better than this school? That's not what it's about. You can't just walk your high stats and think you're going to get into any school in the country that has an average MCAT below your super high MCAT score or something like that. It doesn't work that way. Commandment number 3 is purchase the MSAR maybe. And so this is something where I actually never purchased it myself, but I've heard rave reviews from everybody who has purchased it, that it seems like an absolutely awesome resource that maybe I should have purchased. The reason I didn't really purchase it is I very much trusted The advisor I had, who was an awesome mentor to me and knew more than the MSAR book did, so I didn't really need it in that sense. But it's something that I think is hugely useful, that it doesn't just go into what is the 25th percentile to 75th percentile stats for a school, but it also talks about some of the research experience that applicants typically have, or volunteering experience, and it gives like the mission statement for the school, and it really can help you get to know schools. So I overall highly recommend it, but take that with a grain of salt because I didn't actually pay the $28 myself. Commandment number 4 is do thine research on thine schools. That you want to spend at least 15 minutes on the website of every school you apply to. And when I say at least, I mean probably like 30 minutes to an hour. I want you to do a deep dive on every school so that you actually know about these schools. You should know, do they do cadaveric dissection or prosection? Is it online? Is it in large groups? You should know what kind of clubs the school has. You should know, do they have like a student-run clinic? You should know the mission statement of the school. You should try to like get a general vibe of what is the goal of this school? What are they looking to produce in doctors that graduate from them? And does that align with your goals of what kind of doctor you want to be? You have to really know these schools in depth in order to know what you're a good fit for. Additionally, you should know some of the just like practical stuff of like, what is grading like? Is it a pass-fail school? What is the curriculum schedule? Do they do 2 years in preclinical? Do they do 1 year preclinical? Is it 1.5 years preclinical? All of that kind of stuff is something that you should probably take into consideration when coming up with your school list. And this should hopefully help you answer that question of, all right, if I am a really service-oriented applicant, is this a school that looks for service-oriented applicants, or is it more research-oriented applicants they're looking for? All of these things probably take more than 15 minutes, so maybe I should have said at least 30 minutes, but actually do your research in the schools. Commandment number 5 is consider where you want to be in the country. It might sound like a really lame thing of we're like, yeah, I'm not going to decide where I go to medical school just based on how far it is from the beach. But I think that it's something that you would be surprised at how valid geography is in being a deciding factor for medical schools. That's something you can talk about in an interview if they ask you about it, that it's valid to say, yeah, I have family on the East Coast and I want to be near them, or I'm in a long-term relationship with someone on the East Coast, and so that's something I really value, and work-life balance being on the East Coast. That's a very valid thing to talk about. So if you really don't want to live in Alaska, don't apply to a school in Alaska. If you hate the heat and are just going to be miserable, don't apply to any schools in Florida. Take into account your general well-being and enjoying your time in medical school. You won't be in the hospital 24/7. You want to be able to have activities you enjoy. So not just geographically and weather-wise, but consider what is like the culture like in the area. Is it somewhere that you are going to have fun activities to do besides just study 24/7? Number 6, look at the application requirements. I think MSAR probably makes it easy to just look at this, but if you are like me, you actually go to the school website and figure those out. And specifically, you should be looking at the types of letters of recommendation required. That's something I looked at way too late, that you want to make sure you have a letter of recommendation from a non-science faculty if the school requires a letter of recommendation from a non-science faculty. Additionally, you want to make sure you have all of the general course requirements for that school. Some schools require Orgo. Some schools don't require Orgo. Some schools require a lot of like English focused or writing intensive courses. Other schools don't. So just make sure you have all those boxes checked, that you aren't just making a donation to a random school with your secondary fee because you didn't have the requirements for the school anyways. Commandment number 7 is read the secondary prompts before you apply to a school. And so this is a little bit of just a practical thing of if you are starting to apply to a lot of schools and it becomes splitting hairs, you might want to consider, all right, am I applying to all schools that have 8 essays that I have to write for their secondary application? Looking at you, Duke, love Duke, but you have so many essays. My goodness. But additionally, the secondary prompts are a good way to get a feel for what do these schools value. If they're asking secondary prompts just about research and your research interests, that's probably a research-heavy school. If they have 3 different essays about what diversity you bring to the school and your ideas about race and medicine and cultural determinants of health, and that's something you are really passionate about, that would probably lean you towards applying to that school. If it's something just service oriented and that's a weakness in my application, I don't really have anything to talk about for that, your chances of getting into that school really decrease if it's asking for a secondary prompt that you can't write well. So consider applying to schools where you see a secondary prompt and say, wow, I'm going to write an awesome essay. That's going to greatly increase your chances of getting accepted to that school. Commandment number 8 is consider dual degree programs. This is, if it applies to you, make sure you are applying to schools that have a dual degree program you are interested about. That's something you can definitely bring up in an interview of saying, yeah, I applied to your school because it has not only an awesome medical school, but it has an awesome Masters of Public Health program. And that's something I'm really passionate about for these reasons here. And being able to do those both while in medical school is going to ultimately lead me to be the best physician, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So make sure if you're interested in a dual degree program, make sure the school has it. Commandment number 10 is consider the hospital that the medical school is associated with. And so this can be something to consider the patient population, such that if you're really passionate about rural medicine, you probably don't want to apply to a medical school that is in the middle of an urban city where you are never going to see patients in a rural setting. Vice versa as well. So you want to make sure that you have a hospital that can allow you to explore your interests when it comes to serving the patient population you're most passionate about. Additionally, you want to apply to a medical school that has probably residencies that you are interested in applying. An example would be me. I'm really interested in ortho. For matching into ortho residency, it's pretty much required to do some sort of ortho research while you're in medical school. If you're applying to a medical school that has a hospital associated with it that doesn't have a residency in orthopedic surgery, you're not going to have residents there that can help you get research experience. You're not going to have professors of orthopedic surgery. So it's going to be very difficult to meet those career goals of yours. So make sure that it has those residencies you're actually interested in, even if you have no intention of staying at that medical school for residency. Those residency programs are going to help you get research experience in the field you ultimately want to go into. Commandment number 10, last commandment, is apply to a reasonable number of schools. Now, I can't tell you what the right number of schools to apply to is for you. And that really, in many respects, comes down to a financial question, very unfortunately, that the application process for medical school is so ridiculously expensive and very cost prohibitive for a lot of people. So if you have the financial means to apply to 100 schools, go ahead, apply to 100 schools if you really want to. I would say sort of like 40 schools is a pretty hard cutoff of anything more than 40 schools. You're just applying to schools to apply to schools, and you're just writing essays to write essays, and they're not going to be schools that you're a good fit for. Nobody is a good fit for 40 different schools. So I think that's excessive. Even if you have infinite funds or you're on the fee assistance program, so it is totally free and doesn't matter whatsoever, I still don't think you should be applying to 50 schools. If you want to, I'm not going to stop you, but 40 schools I'd say is a pretty good absolute high level limit. For an absolute low level limit, maybe like 10-ish, 8 schools, like you want to be applying to probably in the 15 to 25 region for most people. I'd say maybe 15 to 30 for most people is a reasonable range. And this is very case specific, that if you are seeing that you just don't have more schools you feel you are a good fit for, it's probably not worth your money to be still applying to more schools, because your chances of getting accepted to them decrease exponentially as you are less and less of a fit for them. And if you can't actually answer the question of why do I want to apply to this specific school, you shouldn't be applying to it. You should be totally ecstatic and excited with specific reasons to get an acceptance to every single school you apply to. So to fit that rule and have like 40 different specific reasons gets pretty difficult. So it's hard to apply to a ton of schools. That being said, if you look at schools and they're like, oh, there's only 3 schools I really, really want to go to that I would be super happy about, you might need to rethink your life a little bit, that you need to expand your interests, or just realize that life doesn't always go perfect, and ultimately, as long as you're a doctor, life's gonna be pretty good. So our first goal is just to be a doctor. Your top 3 schools can't just be Harvard, NYU, and Johns Hopkins. That's probably not gonna end the best for you unless you are an absolutely outstanding candidate, and it might work out perfectly fine. Best of luck to you. But You want to apply to a reasonable number of schools, whatever that means for you. That's where we go back to rule number one and really know thyself and know what type of applicant you are. If you are someone that maybe can get away with applying to less schools, that you have a very specific niche that you fit into. I know some people who applied to like 3 schools and they were just like their 3 in-state schools because they knew they fit with them really well, and that's really where they wanted to be, and they got like 2 acceptances, and it's really, you need 1. That's all that matters. So it's hard to answer that question. Maybe that helped anyone. Hopefully it did. I hope it didn't hurt anyone, that's for sure. I realize commandment number 10 probably shouldn't be called a commandment if it's sort of a very vague rule such as that, but I encourage you to be prudent, be reasonable, lean on some advisor, not just a random guy on the internet. Trust someone that you know has experience with medical school admissions and can look over for you specifically what would be a reasonable number of schools. But I hope I was able to provide some value in this video and help you in some sort of way. If you want to see more of my videos on the application cycle, I'll have a link on your right to a playlist with more of my advice for the medical school application cycle. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, I'd love to hear about them down below. I'll read and respond to every single comment. As always, like the video if you like the video, dislike the video if you dislike the video. Make sure you subscribe, hit the notification bell if you want to catch more of my videos. And until next time, don't be ordinary, go be great.